Hello, everyone. I am Lauren from Mystery to Me, and I am pleased to welcome you to this special preview installment of Mystery to Me and Soho Crime's The Lineup. The series is focused on highlighting Soho Crime authors and giving them a digital platform to talk about their work alongside other Soho Crime authors. Our next event will be April 29th at 6 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. Eastern, and it will be a historical mysteries panel featuring authors S.J. Roseanne, John Shen Yan Mi, and Gary Phillips. And for tonight's event, we are celebrating the upcoming publication of the last novel in Jacqueline Winspear's internationally best-selling Maisie Dobbs series with special door prizes. At the end of the event, one attendee will win a signed first edition copy of Maisie Dobbs, and two others will win Mystery to Me gift cards worth $50 and $25. And if you'd like to pre-order a signed copy of Comfort of Ghosts, you can do so using the button below the video. Finally, there is a Q&A button on the right side of your screen. If you have any questions for our authors, please feel free to submit them there. And without further ado, I am pleased to announce our moderator for this evening, Cara Black. Cara Black is the author of 21 books in the New York Times best-selling Amy LeDuc series, as well as the thrillers 3 Hours in Paris, a national bestseller, and Night Flight to Paris. She has received multiple nominations for the Anthony and Macavity Awards, and her books have been translated into German, Norwegian, Japanese, French, Spanish, Italian, and Hebrew. She lives in San Francisco with her husband and visits Paris frequently. And with that, I will turn it over to you both.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Speaking of going to Paris, I am here at the San Francisco airport waiting for a flight to Paris. So excuse me if there's muffled noises in the background. And Jackie, I heard, has just come in from the stables, and that we could have had her part out at the stables. But it's my honor and pleasure to introduce, though you all know her, Jacqueline Winspear, the New York Times international and national best-selling author who's won multiple awards, and she was nominated for the Dayton Literary Peace Prize. She was a finalist, which I think is a very wonderful prize for her. Jackie has written 18 books, which I'm sure you've all read, in the Maisie series, and her memoir, This Time Next Year We'll Be Laughing, which is really one of my favorite of your books. I love that book.
Oh, Cara, thank you. Thank you.
Really love that. And the World War II standalone, The White Lady, which cleverly bridges actually World War I and World War II, and The Care and Management of Lies, where you go into really focus on World War I. You've got this huge body of work that has kept her very busy, as we know. They're not too busy for her horses, which is another passion of hers. So I just want to say, Jackie, I live in San Francisco. You used to live in Marin in the Bay Area. And I remember going to your first signing in San Francisco for Maisie Dobbs Uno, the premier, and at Cleanwell Lighted Place for Books. And it was so wonderful to hear you talk. And I, became a fan for life. So just get that out there. And I'm sure I'm not the only one here.
What I remember about that event, being terrified, I think, and I was buying, because I'd never done these events before, and I think I'd just done one other event before, a Cleanwell Lighted Place for Books, and you can get those little homeopathic remedies in little blue tubes. I found one for, oh gosh, what was it called? Stage fright and anxiety. I'm not kidding. I get on half the thing before I went in there. I was so terrified. And I remember my heart was beating so much, my blouse was going like this. And then you walked in, you came with your son. And I thought, Cara Black's here. Oh my God. And it was, I was just blown away, It was so gracious of you and to come. And I remember you saying, well, I wanted to be a support. And I thought,
oh, well, I did. And then I became a fan, so right away. So.
It's really
Thank you for that. That's very kind of you as well. So now it's bittersweet. I think we are seeing the sort of last Maisie Dobbs, and we're going to probably talk more about that. But how does it feel, for you, this huge body of work, and so, but first tell us where Maisie came from, and when you got your artistic spark. I believe in San Rafael, California, in traffic.
I was stuck in traffic. Cara, you've probably heard me say this before, but I've often called it a sort of moment of artistic grace. I mean, I was on my way to work. It was, gosh, about 7:45 in the morning, and I was on Second Street, going down towards the freeway. And for those of you that don't know the area, it's one stop sign after another. It's a long street, lots of stop signs, and it was chucking it down with rain, just as it does in California. Never rains, but it pours. And literally, I was doing my usual thing, stuck there, just red tail lights ahead of me, red everywhere. And I was doing that usual thing where I'm thinking, now, did I leave the back door open so the dog could get out? Just did I turn off the kettle? Did I do this? Because you rush out the door, and then my mind's, I don't know where my mind went, but suddenly, and it was just like watching a movie. This woman walked into my imagination, and it was, as I said, it was like watching a movie. She came up through Warren Street tube station in London. I knew it was Warren Street because I used to work in Fitzroy Square. That was my tube station I went to. But everything was different. It wasn't a big heavy steel escalator. It was a wooden quantity-con escalator. There was no turns. There was no, flick your card at the little pad and the turnstile opens. It was the old-fashioned walk-round turnstile. And she was dressed in the garb of the mid-1920s. And I knew she was a very serious person. She walked out, she had a conversation with a newspaper seller. And then she walks down the street, and she is outside this very shabby-looking Georgian building. And she takes out an envelope with 2 keys. And it's 1 key for the front door and 1 key for the office that she's just rented. And I think people that read the books know what comes next. But I knew who she was. I knew her name. I didn't have to sit there and think, oh, well, let's think up a name. I just knew, this is Maisie Dobbs. And I knew she was a professional, not an amateur investigator, and that there was more to her than that. And it just, well, the next thing I know, all these cars are honking, and this guy's yelling out, wait, shade of green, lady. The cars have moved on, and I had to sort of quickly speed up. But by the time I got to work, I had this story in my head, and I've referred to it as a moment of artistic grace, but we've talked about this sort of thing before. That doesn't happen in a vacuum, and for me, it was deeply rooted in an interest I've had in my entire life, not just in the history of women, but in the true social impact of war. The true social impact of war, and particularly perhaps on the lives of women and children, and so that was where it all started. And I came home that night, it's still pouring with rain. And the dog is looking at me as if to say, "I have to go out now," and I'm like this, typing away, and I just wrote the first chapter just like that.
You did. You just started writing. Wow.
I just writing. And
wow.
I'd never written fiction before. I didn't think my future lay in fiction. I couldn't imagine, as much as I wanted it, being able to be a full-time writer. I just could not imagine it. I couldn't ever imagine, selling more than 1 article a month or something like that. I was writing on assignment on the side, for a couple of journals in the UK specializing in international education. And I was also trying to get my essays published. And, I love the personal essay. I love memoir. And I didn't think my future was in fiction because, to be honest, I thought that there was something solid about fact. You're dealing with, I'm interviewing, I love interviewing people. I was interviewing people. I was writing my pieces and everything.
Right.
I thought if ever I was able to write a book, it would be something like a biography of somebody. Or about an era, but of course you then start thinking about it and you think, well, everybody's done that before. Anything you're interested in, they've done it, and they've got bigger names than you'll ever be. But I don't know if you've found this, Cara. I find that I can touch truth more readily in fiction than I can ever do with facts.
Exactly. I
Yeah,
think so too. Yeah.
yeah,
And it gives you a license to, to go somewhere with it, because it's not nonfiction, a lot of times. I know doing research in Paris, it's like, well, how are you going to use this and what will happen? And I'm like thinking, well, I'm talking to a historian and that's how they think and I understand. But for me, it's like getting the truth and then going from there. But of course, your background is so interesting. I mean, you talked about how this, was simmering in you, but I mean, you grew up with grandfather who lived with you um, from World War One. Your parents who had to leave London or wanted to leave London from the housing shortage, and you sort of grew up with this generation that was that had trauma, generational trauma from the First World War, and so I know we talked about it, and of course it's so reflected in your books. Can you talk about that? Because our country, we didn't, have the same kind of trauma. We
I
were.
yeah, I'm very interested in this whole business of generational trauma, and I think sometimes people don't. Well, no reason to understand it if you're not faced with it, or you don't see the patterns. Um, but I read a really interesting book by Martin Parsons, Dr. Martin Parsons. It was published a number of years ago now, and it was oh gosh, I'm trying to remember the title. But anyway, it was about it was War Child. It was called War Child.
Right, I remember. Yeah.
Found at the Institute for the Study of the War Child at the University of Reading in England, and of course, when it was founded, they were able to interview a lot of evacuees, people like my mum who were evacuated during World War II. But they also interviewed and got to talk to child soldiers from various other countries, and also, people that had were in Poland in World War II, and so they really went around the different decades and so on. And what he found was, and this really made me start thinking about my own family, that it takes 3 generations for
Three.
a war in childhood to work its way through the family system. But
Wow.
what do you do if there's one war after another? And I wrote a piece just last year or so where I thought, there's kids in Ukraine now that
Right.
when they have grandchildren, their grandchildren won't understand their behaviors, that things that they do, things that they
Right.
say. And I'll give an example of that. My dad
Right.
was always a quiet man. He didn't like loud noises. And that was not actually to do with the fact that at 18 he was an explosives expert blowing up bridges in Germany in World War II. It was actually to do with the fact that he grew up in a very quiet house because his dad suffered shell shock in World War One, and
Wow.
was reactive to loud noises. And I witnessed that as a child.
Yes.
So those, let's just say there's traumas from war that um, fiction lends themselves to fiction because you can get to the truths of it. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a politician trying to work out my angle. I'm telling a story about people. And as you have done in your books, you're telling stories about people. And I think, as much as, both of us write books that could be called, there's something that the pattern of a mystery, that journey through chaos to resolution, or not, as the case may be, that lends itself to exploration of human trauma.
Yeah, I totally agree. But there's that collective weight of memory, and in a way, mystery tries to make sense of the senseless.
Yes.
To put some order to the randomness of what happens. And in this story, Maisie, which I love because grabbed from the get go, I mean, this this tattered Georgian house, these, a person, and we can't talk so much about this, right? Because of spoilers.
Got to be very careful.
Yeah. It ends up in this house with these homeless youngsters who have been squatting in this mansion in post-war London, and they have this incredibly unusual wartime history, which gives them a really good reason to fear for their lives. And so Maisie also is dealing with, as loved ones are coming home now post-war, which I think you brought out so skillfully. People didn't come home right away. It took time. It wasn't just like, okay, war is over. They're not on a plane or anything. It's so much involved, and all the chances for them to have some treatment, which was very different from what we would be doing nowadays. So they're struggling with these challenges in a post-war Britain with shortages to live, still rationing in effect, just like in France. There was a housing shortage, rationing.
It was, in fact, rationing didn't end in Britain until the end of 1954 on paper. That's when but there was still shortages for a good while after that. And it's interesting because even in more or less as soon as the war sort of ended, so to speak, even in the United States, there were groups that were getting together. They were called the Bring Back Daddy groups because America wanted home, and logistically you couldn't just get everybody on ships and get them home. There were priorities. There would be brought back very carefully and things like that, and also there were a good number of troops and that actually kind of liked the idea of remaining in Britain, and for various reasons. Those of you that read, people who read The Sunlit Weapon will probably guess what I'm talking about there. It was quite a tumultuous time, and if you can imagine it, I was born 10 years after the war. I was born in the country. But all our relations lived in London. So about once a year, we'd go up on the train or the bus or the coach, as they call the long distance buses in Britain, and we'd go to visit the relatives. And I loved it because I had a ton of cousins, but we were still playing on bomb sites. When I was 6, 7. So you're talking about 16 years after the war, early 1960s, we're playing on bomb sites. The last bomb sites were finally cleared from the East End to make way for all the big buildings and the arenas that had to go in for the 2012 Olympics. And yes, they were overgrown with weeds and grass by then, but they were still bomb sites. There were still bomb sites there.
I remember in 1984 being in London and near my friend's house in Islington. I can't remember where. There was a overgrown, right, what had been a bomb site, and I was like, I went, seriously? And she goes, oh yeah, there's others.
Yeah, and there were people that definitely said that the peace was worse than the war, and also because immediately at the end of the war, one of the chief objectives, was to, they had to look after the people of the other embattled countries. So there was a big push to get a lot of foodstuffs into Germany.
Right.
And so on because of what was happening there. And there was this whole thing, and just as an aside, I remember my mum telling me about this, and we've both heard our good friend, the writer Tony Broadbent, talking.
Oh yes, Tony has a big opinion about this.
And they made up the quantity of flour for bread with chalk, and you broke open the bread and it was grey, and you had better bread in the war. You had to line up for hours to get it, but they had better bread during the war than after the war. And so there's and I know this is true here in this country, although it's more to do with the Depression. But when I was a kid, you didn't leave a scrap of food on your plate. You never were given any more than you could eat. And someone asked me today, do you like Brussels sprouts? I said no, I can't stand them. And It was because when I was a kid, I mean, it was my most unfavorite vegetable, but I had to sit at the table until I finished all my dinner. No, you stay there, even if you have to stay, or you have it for breakfast. You don't waste food, you know.
For sure, for sure. A French woman once told me we went to the market together, and there were they're like rutabagas or Jerusalem artichokes.
Oh, we
And
call
what do you call them?
weed.
We, so I said, let's get one. And I saw this thing, we can make it like with emulsion on it, make it, nouvelle cuisine. She goes, never. That's all I ate during the war when we were lucky. I can't stand the smell. I can't stand the taste. And I was like, okay, understood. And that just, I thought, wow, how strong. Well, of course it would be, right? Of course, you wouldn't forget that. Was there any side character along the way who really just kind of changed? I mean, did you, I'm thinking of Billy, but I wonder if Billy always had a major role, or did he sort of evolve, or any other side character?
It's really funny. As I was writing the series, I realized that what I was writing was actually, if you will, almost a saga about three different families making their way through this tumultuous period from just before World War I until the end of World War II. And they all have different experiences or a different take on experiences. There's Maisie and her family, which is sort of grown and contracted at times. And there's Billy Beale and his wife with their kids. And they've gone through difficult times, particularly people. I'm going to refer back to something here, and I'm assuming people might know this story, that when they lost their little girl, and that is reflected upon in the Comfort of Ghosts.
Yes.
Because a vaccine for diphtheria had just become available, and then you have Priscilla and her family, and of course she suffered great loss in the Great War when her three brothers died, or were killed in the war, and that scenario was not at all unusual. I remember when I'd done my first visit to the battlefields of the Somme and Ypres, and we're going back to 2004 now, and my parents were alive at the time, and this little train, I came back through the Channel Tunnel. And then from Ashford Station, I got actually a little direct stop. It's a direct stopping train that stopped in the little tiny hamlet, not even the village where they live. And it was this little train where you had to. They didn't just stop. You had to ring the bell, or someone had to wait. And my mum and dad picked me up from there. And then I was flying back, excuse me, to the United States the next day. And so they said, come on, let's go get fish and chips. So we went to a local town to get fish and chips, because you've got to have your fish and chips before you fly home.
Of course.
And they parked right next to the War Memorial. And for, this, but for everyone, listening from home, almost every single community in the UK, and this is true of France, has a war memorial. And the banks, you'll see them in banks, in factories. You'll go into the post office, and there it is, the list of the post office workers who fell during the First World War. So we pulled up, and the fish and chip shop was like 2 doors along. There's the War Memorial, the fish and chip shop down there. And I waited in the car, and I just looked up at that War Memorial, and there I saw the names. 4 boys from one family, and it was a small area. So you knew they were at least cousins, but most likely brothers. 3 from another family, 2 from another family, all these names, and they were all very much local names. Wow. The way that they structured the regiments then, they probably all died on the same day, possibly going over the top at the same time. And so, when you think of Billy, but you think he's got the 2 boys now that have been serving in World War II, or have served in World War II. And then Priscilla, who's lost her 3 brothers, and
definitely
what has happened to her family, and particularly one of her sons, flying hurricanes during the Battle of Britain, the unsung hero of the Battle of Britain. So it's So going back to what I was doing with this, it was really sort of creating a body of work that I always had an idea of where I would end it rather than.
Really? You did? Tell us.
I had an experience. You remember, just for everyone, I went along to one of Cara's events just recently, and so I know you had a very similar experience to me, in that. But what I will say is that while I was writing Maisie Dobbs, there were things that I were writing. It could have been a paragraph here, or it could have been a character there, or something that I realized wasn't fitting. And because I come from a family that never throws anything away, we're all parrots. I would put it on my computer desktop marked fragments. I just chuck it in there because I might come back to it or whatever. And then I finished Maisie Dobbs, and I was very lucky to get a publisher, and we had the same editor. And
Laura Haraska, co-founder of Soho Press.
Absolutely. And very old school, brilliant editor, definitely held your feet to the fire. And when the book went into pre-production, she called me, and I thought Maisie Dobbs was my novel. I mean, I didn't know that I would be writing another novel. I didn't really know that. And she said, "Well, let's talk about the next book in the series." And I thought, "The series?" And the same experience. You suddenly think it's a series.
Yeah, she said, "You are writing a series, aren't you?" And I lied and said, "Of course I am." But yes.
And I did something. Well, what I said, I'd love to talk about this, but there's someone at the door right now. So I'll call you back, Laura. And I put the phone down. I thought, oh, what am I going to do? And so I'm coming back to your question here. What I did, I got into my fragments folder, printed off every page, and I stuck them all over the floor and started moving them around. And I realized the spark, not a story, not even the kindling or anything, just a little something that might grow, that I might nurture and grow. And I got them into some sort of order. And I thought, I think I've got about another 4 or 5, maybe 6 books here, or stories.
Wow.
And then I sat down and thought, well, what do I want to create? And I was very fortunate, I think, to have that opportunity to just sit down and think about it. And I didn't know whether I'd ever be in the game long enough to do it. But as we know, there's an arc to every story. And I thought, what if there was an arc to the whole series? So that, I can go off the path when I want, but I come back to that overall arc. And so that's kind of, I had this vague endpoint in mind, and I knew roughly when it would be, and I didn't know exactly what would happen because there are characters that have come up in the meantime that I had never ever planned, and many of them. But I realized that I could, at some point I wanted body of work. I wanted it there, so I could feel something about it, and also, I was moving the books through time. It wasn't,
right.
One of the series where it could have happened on any day, and I've got 50 people dying in one village over 10 years, but I was moving it through time. So there had to be a point when, Maisie's, the main character's life changes, and I knew I was working toward that. So maybe it wasn't as prescriptive as that, but I definitely had this vision. And someone asked me the other day what was the most surprising thing about it, and I said, well, that it's gone on for this long. I mean, I didn't think I'd be able to do that. I think sometimes we, without rambling here, she said rambling, but sometimes when we start a new story, you don't know if you're going to be able to do what you want to do. You don't know if you're going to be able to bend and twist everything as you want it. And it's a very, when you, especially got a deadline looming and people are expecting a manuscript, it's a very scary place to be, because you just don't know if you can pull it off. And I feel very fortunate that I've managed to get this far and to have readers that have followed me this far. I mean, it's, we're both incredibly lucky that way, aren't we?
Yeah, I feel very lucky.
You got
I
more
could,
than going to Paris.
yeah, I've killed them in all the arrondissements. Now I've got to figure something else out.
Yeah.
That's my trip. But yeah, so what other challenge do you find? Is it thinking, I mean, you just mentioned deadlines. Is there anything staying focused with, your life has changed, both are, 20 years, you've been writing, so things have changed in your life, circumstances, lots of things. Is there anything that's changed or,
I think things change along the way, and I have got a habit of changing things because I always wanted to keep myself on my toes creatively.
Mhm.
So, for example, I never wanted to feel as if I wanted with every single book to challenge myself. And so, for example, I think it was in Among the Mad, I had a timeline, it was boom, boom, boom. It was the timelines were mentioned. So it was an hour by hour race to find this guy who was clearly incredibly wounded in the mind before he caused any more damage. And then, there was the American Agent, where I wove in the real news pieces from the day.
Right, I remember, yeah.
Well, there was a great idea, but I didn't realize I was going to pay so much money to use Edward R.
Songs too.
Murrow's, broadcasts from the war. But
Right.
Broadcasting and radio and the impact of radio, particularly on women's lives, was really interesting to me. So I try to do that, and also to weave in historical truths so that they become part of my story. And with this in A Sunlit Weapon, there was not only the story of the women ferry pilots who actually flew way more aircraft than men, and it was very dangerous in a way that it wasn't for the men. And they were talk about an uphill battle, up in the air battle, and also the challenges facing, or some of them lack of challenges facing, the black troops that came to Britain from America. Coming segregated country into a non-segregated country, and that was challenging for them initially, and then for the people that they were serving with. So I think what I've tried to do, particularly also with the characters, is try to surprise myself. And creatively, if I look at the White Lady, gosh, I had a real I knew what I wanted to do, but it terrified me. I really didn't think I'd be able to weave it in the way that I wanted.
It's very impressive. It's super impressive. I told you that. And, I remember you saying that there was a woman, you would see it down from your parents, who lived in the Grace and Favor. Tell everybody what that is and that story. I love that.
Yeah, it was, I've written about this in my newsletters. I have a newsletter archive on my website. So if you go to my website, JacquelineWinspear.com, there's a newsletter archive. And in my newsletter,
I recommend it, everyone. I really do. Yeah.
The history behind the mystery. And really, it goes back to when I was only 3 years old, and seeing this woman every day, as my mum and I walked to the farm where my mum did all the accounts for the farms, and I was entertained with my colouring books and everything. But we used to walk past this woman who was walking from her house on her daily walk, I guess, and then we'd go through the forest. And just when picture that this whole the farms were amid this massive area of forest, which was crown lands. Today it belongs to Forestry England, but they were what we call crown lands. They belonged to the monarchy. We lived in a tied cottage that went with my mum's job. This woman, who lived in a much nicer cottage, what is a house of old house up the road, and probably right in the forest actually, she lived in what was called a Grace and Favour house. And a Grace and Favour property to this day is a property that is given to someone to live in for, the duration of their days, by the grace and favor of the monarch for services rendered to the country. So, and it could be, often it's a lady in waiting. It's someone who's given, the head gardener or something at Buckingham Palace, who's allowed to live in a grace and favor home for the rest of their life. In fact, the Queen's dresser was given a grace and favor property, which I think she was then asked to move out of, to go to a different grace and favor property later. But anyway, that's how it works. But
this services rendered, or loyalty, or many things. Yeah.
This woman had done something different, and everybody knew about it, but nobody really talked about it. And I can still remember my mum leaning down and saying to me, "She's one of those women who parachuted into France during the war." And little me said, "What's a parachute?" And I remember seeing her again when I was about 12. We were driving through the village, and my mum went, "Oh, there's that woman again." And I looked around, and she was gone. I mean, I saw her turning, and then she was gone. But it stayed with me. Things like that stay with you, and it always fascinated me. Plus, I always wanted to write about a woman who went through 2 world wars in some kind of undercover way, and that was easy in a way for World War II, but how to get someone who did both those wars, until I was writing a lesson in secret, and I was doing research for a character there. I found out about La Dame Blanche, the White Lady, which was the network in Belgium during the World War I, and women from pre-adolescent girls right up to senior citizens.
I thought that was ingenious. I really did, but also, it happened. But you made it realistic. I mean, I bought it, but it's also that these women, or any woman of these generations, they took the official, they signed the Official Secrets Act, in the UK and in France, whatever, and they never spoke. I mean, that was it. It was serious. I mean, they went to the grave.
Well, the interesting thing is that even though people sign the Official Secrets Act, just by dint of being a British citizen, you are bound by the Official Secrets Act.
Are you? Yeah.
My mum had to sign it. When she worked. There's me telling everyone, but it's okay. I wrote about it once, and I figured that because she's passed on now, no one could come and get her. But she worked on the government telephone lines, telephone exchanges in, it would have been in the mid-50s. And they had to do practice drills in case of nuclear attack. And
wow.
You're underground, and they're actually going to open up this part of that area soon for people to see. But it was all top secret, that there was this allowance for government communications to continue through a nuclear attack. And one day my mum, these big thick doors just would clamp behind them. And when they after they went down for one of these drills, and my mum said, what would happen in a real attack? Because I've got a little girl at home, and what do I do? And this woman showed her a cabinet with arms in and said, "You stay here and do your job." And so my mum left.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think anyway, I would too.
The cloak and dagger in the comfort of ghosts, a different kind of cloak and dagger, of course, and we can't say too much about that. But
right. So I wanted to ask you. There's one of my favorite sayings, and then we're going to open it to questions, because I know people are probably chomping at the bit. But Anais Nin, the French author, said that writers often write to experience life twice. There's another quote: writers right to understand what they don't. I think I lean more in that category, um, because there's a lot of things I don't understand, and that makes me curious. And I'm sure,
No,
I mean,
I think I do. I think I delve into that area, um, because I do have this interest in that in women's lives during that area. And I've noticed, actually, sorry about this, that my screen's a bit slow, and I don't know whether that's just me here or whether you're noticing it. So my apologies to anybody. I can't do anything about
you
that.
look you look fine from here.
Okay. But yeah, here's something that I shared with recently, and that is that when I was 15, my mum changed jobs, and she went to work in a what was called a boys' detention center. It was a detention center for boys. It was not for first-time offenders. It was for young men 18 to 21. They were second or third time offenders, and they didn't always do something that was, some of these were
Right.
somewhat serious, but they had 3 to 6 month sentences. Usually first-time offenders, unless they've actually killed someone, get probation of some sort. Anyway, my mom started as a sort of like, just a clerical officer there, what they call a clerical officer. And then she worked her way up, and she was very much in charge of administration. Prisons administration is something she ended up building a career into. And she wasn't in a disciplinary role, but she had some communication with the inmates. And one day she came home from work, and I was a teenager at the time. I might have been home from college, because I think I was about 18, 19. So I made her a cup of tea, and she looked unusually weary. And I said, and she just looked like she'd had a hard day. And I said, Mum, I said, why, how do these, because I was the same age as a lot of these kids. And I said, why is it they end up there? What happens that they end up in a place like that? And she was thoughtful for a while, and she said, Jackie, she said, it's because somewhere along the line, someone didn't care enough. And I realized, it was when I wrote my memoir, I realized, recounting that story, that those words had really nestled in my heart. And I think and it's almost, without me even realizing it, have underpinned every book that I've written, is that I wanted someone to care enough. I want, Maisie Dobbs in the first book, when she lays her hand on the heart of a murderer, who's wounded himself from what he's seen in war. She cares enough. And I wanted there to be this caring, and that is in my standalone non-mystery, The Care and Management of Lies, and also in The White Lady. There's someone who cares enough. And
Right.
it makes me quite emotional, because I think that's really underpinned a lot of what I write. And so what am I experiencing when I write? I'm not experiencing my past, because I didn't live through that time. But I'm experiencing, in a way, a past that it's almost handed down in the cells,
Yep. Yeah.
And I think that's for both of us. And it goes back to Martin Parsons and what,
And Lady Rowan says it in Birds of a Feather. She says, that's one more thing I detest about war. It's not over when it ends. It still lives inside the living, doesn't it? Which just what it speaks to what you're saying. It's true. It's true. And yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, and when I think of some of the letters and emails I've received over the years, it was round about, you think, well, which book was it? But the second or third book, there were two or three communications I had that really stayed with me. And one was after I wrote Pardonable Lies. And in Pardonable Lies, Priscilla refers to what happened in the war. She was an ambulance driver during the war. And what happened in the war? It's the dragon that lives inside her. And she has to keep the dragon mollified. In the posts, not a massive giveaway, Priscilla has some challenges with that dragon again. And I received a letter from a gentleman who told me that he was a doctor. He said, I'm a very successful doctor. He said, I was a junior medic during Vietnam. And he said, reading your book has made me realize the dragon lives in all of us who have served. He said, it lives inside me. He said, and I have realized the extent to which I struggle to keep that dragon down.
Wow.
And I thought, you know, I get so upset about that sometimes when I think of some of the letters I've received. And then there was the one from, I think it was after Maisie Dobbs, from a lady that was 94 years old. She sent me a letter from England. And she told me the story of her father, who came home from World War I, and he took his own life when she was 11. And she said, I never understood why. I've struggled with it all my life, and now I know. And I tell you. And I'm sure after your books, you know, particularly, you know, the two set in you know, World War II, I'm sure you receive the same, and in all your books, you know, I'm sure you receive similar letters, you know, similar communications. And what is, talking about things that surprise us, what has surprised me are the number of communications I get from people who have the dragon from more recent wars.
Oh, yeah, it speaks to how many generations. It's just.
I had to beat the dragon down a few times.
Yeah, we're having more dragons coming along. Okay, what's next? Before we open it up to questions, can you give us a taste or a hint? Oh, the crew's arriving, the Irish crew, they're all wearing green.
What I'm doing next?
Yes. Is there any
too much of a giveaway.
Okay, well, is it a book?
I'll tell you.
No.
Because there are several ways I can go, but one of the things I'm focusing on the moment, I never intended The White Lady to be a series. I didn't want it to be a series, and it will not be a series. But I'm thinking about a sequel. Yeah.
Well, you can just write that for me then. I'll just take.
Yeah. I'll write it for you and send it to you. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like to experiment and do some more short stories, and I'd like to do more essays and articles and things like that. I think it's, and I guess this is a good, I don't know what the timeline is at the moment, but because you and I could always go on for a while, but
we could.
I think one of the things I really never wanted to be, I never wanted to be a one-trick pony as a writer, and I do write essays and articles for publication. I've done that all through the time I have been writing my novels. So, and I think it's really important. I think writers have to cross-train. We've got to be cross-trainers.
Cross-training, exercising muscles we haven't used. That's what I like to think. So can someone help us with the questions? Because I am so sorry I can't see it.
Yes, I'm here to help moderate.
Thank you.
So we had a couple of comments that all kind of agreed and had the same understanding of the longevity effects of war. And so I just wanted to make sure that people were also feeling the same way that some of those letters that you've received as well in the audience here today. The first question I have comes from Nancy, who says, as it became apparent that your readers wanted more Maisie books, did you map out a series? And did you have a sense where her story would take her?
Actually, I didn't map it out as such. I had an idea. I don't believe in being too prescriptive about anything. I mean, I don't do, some people do a very prescriptive synopsis for their books before they start writing. I am not that person. I know roughly where the end is, and I just have to get there. And so I knew roughly where the series arc would end. I didn't know quite how steep it would be in the middle. I didn't know whether it would take 10 books, 15 books, 20 books, or what. I just knew that was going in that direction. So I'm not very prescriptive in that way. And I think that it wasn't written because I've never written because readers expected something, because there are so many different types of readers. If you go into that, if you start doing that, then you're going to miss people somewhere along the line. You have to write your story and trust that, they will come, so to speak. Someone once said to me, "Who do you write for?" And I thought, well, I know. I write my stories. At one point, I always thought I wrote them, for my mum and dad or something like that. But I don't know.
Well,
I think I write my stories for me, to tell you the truth. I write because I'm a bit of a research nerd anyway, and I love reading about the eras that I'm interested in, and then I get ideas for stories, and I write because I want to write the story, and I write because I want to explore the characters. I want to put people in a situation and say, yeah, I know what you're going to do with it. Let's see how you get out of that one. So it's maybe not as hard as that, but yeah. Does that answer the question?
I think it does. We have another comment or a question here. We have one from Connie, who wants to know, why did you decide to end the Maisie Dobbs series?
Because I didn't want to go on forever. I also don't believe in writing a series and creating scenarios just to keep a character going, so to speak. My characters have a have an arc to their lives, not just the story. So I never wanted to just keep writing for the sake of it. It wasn't part of my MO. I could have done that, but also, I'm moving people through time. And Maisie Dobbs, she's not old, but as people will find in The Comfort of Go, she has other priorities, and also there are other things she wants to be engaged in. And so I've taken the characters through life events as well as, her professional work as an investigator. So no, I never, people, I never wanted to sort of come up with plots just to weave the characters around. The character, to me, as Elizabeth George always says, plot is character, character is plot. And for me, it was characters drove everything, and their lives drove everything. Their life stories drove everything, and I think Cara is the same in that regard.
Great. I think this next question from Claire might speak a little bit to your desire to do research. And Claire would like you to speak a little bit more on the impact of radio on women's lives.
Oh, well, radio was very, very big because, it was particularly within the home. If you can imagine that, it brought the outside into the home if you were working in the home. And admittedly, there was women were engaged in broadcasting as well from the early days. So there's actually some really good books on the subject. But of course, I can't touch on some of those facts because they're not really front and center of my mind at the moment, because that research I left behind to some extent. But if you can imagine it, that women were suddenly, they could listen in the workplace, they could listen in the home, and it definitely, and particularly with the BBC and the World Service, which was very established very early on, you bring other worlds into the home, and your lives grow. I mean, I know for me, listening to I love old-fashioned radio, and it's there's everything from plays to current affairs. The news was there. It's fascinating, that history, the whole history of broadcasting. And of course, in the war, it was, the American agent. A lot of people thought that the American agent was this particular character in the book, but also another key American agent was actually Edward Murrow. He had a massive impact on America's attitude to going into World War II. And just as a side, it was very carefully planned. his he broadcast from this one room deep in the back of the BBC in London, and it was a different kind of broadcast, but for Americans to listen to. And they deliberately broadcast at, I think it was 11 o'clock at night. So it was, and also it was broadcast a bit later as well. There were two broadcasts of the same show, so to speak, at dinner time in America. So people were sitting around the dinner table. And you see, before, in the earlier days of World War II, America was very isolationist, and an organization called America First was becoming more powerful. And people, understandably, didn't want to get involved in another European war. And he could see that what was happening. And he just wanted to make sure, I think, or to do his best to make sure that ordinary people in America knew exactly what was happening in Europe. So, for example, one of the things he did, he went out one day with his microphone, and he would go out. He didn't just stay in a broadcasting studio. He went out with his mic and a recording equipment, and he held the mic just above the ground. So all you could hear was footsteps. And he said, those footsteps are people running down towards the shelters to save their lives. Ordinary people running to try and get down the shelter before the bombs drop, or while bombs are dropping. And suddenly, it shocked Americans listening to this company dinner, thinking, "Oh my God, these people are under attack right now, and we're listening to it." And he also went on a bombing mission, and he would do things like that. So that the power of that radio was phenomenal, and very much so on women, particularly when you hear little children running for their cover. It's you look at the whole gamut of experiences that came through on radio.
Awesome. Well, I think that's the time we have for questions, which means it's time to announce the winners of our prizes. So starting with the $25 gift certificate to Mystery to Me, our winner is Janice Keller. And for all the people who are winning, we will send you emails tomorrow. Then for our $50 gift certificate, we have Stan Shank. And then for our big winner, the first edition of Maisie Dobbs, we have Anne Foley.
Nice. That's nice. They're very nice.
Well done. Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you, Jacqueline, and thank you, Cara, for being here. This was a fantastic conversation, and I'm so glad that we got to take part in it. And thank you all for joining us for this event this evening. If you do want to pre-order a signed copy of Comfort of Ghosts, you can do so using the button below the video. But with that, I'll wish you all a lovely evening.
Thank
you so much. Thank you, Jackie.
Have a good flight, Cara.
Thank you. Oh, yeah, there's the plane.
Uh-oh. There we go.
Bye.